All right, I'm excited to talk hormones today with Dr. Tracy and really talk about you guys who are the high performing, driven, ambitious individuals, but also athlete. And I got some expert on the show today that I've come across through mutual friends. So thought leader in the industry of helping people be healthy from the inside out, looking at the whole picture and really figuring out it's not just lab testing, but it's looking at the holistic approach as I talk about. So thank you, Dr. Gapin, coming on my podcast today to help our athletes be fit and healthy for now and their future self.
You got it. Glad to be here today. Thanks.
So I really always love to ask people what their why is. And you have a great story because you're a doctor coming from traditional medicine, so to speak,
Yeah.
and then transformed into more of this holistic approach. So briefly tell us a little bit more about what's your why, and we'll talk about what is the Gapin Institute.
Yeah, thanks so much. So I spent 23 years in traditional medicine and very focused on a busy urology practice, men's health, big open surgeries, robotic surgery, prostate cancer, kidney stones, et cetera. About halfway through my career, I woke up one day and realized that I was a mess. I was about 30 pounds overweight and had a lot of health issues. To put it lightly, went to a local doctor in town here and he couldn't help me. And that's what really opened my eyes to the fact that our healthcare system is broken and that we don't have healthcare, we have disease care. And even myself as a men's health expert, air quotes, could not give me the answers that I needed. And so that got me down a lot of rabbit holes. Learning about functional medicine, learning about epigenetics and precision medicine, which is using personalized genetics to individualize health. Learned about hormone optimization and anti-aging approaches and peptide therapy and how to integrate technology, specifically wearable tech. And next thing I know, I was able to transform my health and really become a better me again, so to speak. And that enabled me more than anything, Debbie, back to, the big question, what is my why? It enabled me to be the best dad that I could be. And that's really what it's all about. I have a beautiful 7-year-old little daughter, I have a 9-year-old amazing little boy and a beautiful wife. And how can I be, the amazing husband, father, and leader that I need to be? And that transformation enabled me to really accomplish that. And so I started introducing these principles to my patients in my urology practice, and they were seeing amazing results as well. And I realized that I was living the wrong life. I was not meant to be a disease model urologist. I was meant to be a doctor focused on human performance and optimization and longevity. And so I stepped away from my traditional medical practice last year so that I can launch the Gapin Institute for High Performance Health to really follow my passion and purpose in life.
That's great. Yeah. Well, I was talking to you beginning of the show that my dad passed away a few months ago, and it was, heart disease 10 years ago. And then so he's a heart disease doctor, and he was having kidney issues, to seeing the kidney doctor, and then had a type of lymphoma cancer. So then the cancer doctor, and it's no one ever looked at, what we'll talk about, lab testing and hormones and how to optimize your health. It was more like, okay, treat this for that. And the ranges on lab testing really drives me nuts because I just redid my labs that they're like, this huge range is your normal range, you're okay. And it's just like, how many people are slipping through the cracks, getting ill and passing away as my dad did, because they're looking at, oh, you're okay, you're normal. And like my dad, I asked the doctors here in Palm Desert Eisenhower Hospital to test his insulin. They're like, well, what's insulin? He's not diabetic. I'm like, right. Oh my God, where are you guys, under a rock? And I think it's so important to look at like how feel your best self and train and do everything you can do now to improve your future self. So I say that all the time, like, okay, I just turned 51. How do I want to be living my life when I'm 70, 80, 90 years old? And it's what we're doing now. So we're not going to be ill in the hospital and having problems when we're 80. It's just so controllable. So I appreciate what you are doing, and your mission is really what I love. So, people often, talking about lab testing, when they go to their doctor, typical doctor, they don't talk a little bit about the labs we get, because I have a challenge as a health coach with clients to go to the doctor, get it covered by insurance, and get enough labs to really see the whole picture, and how I have to, do a GI test, do a dried urine test, like a Dutch test. So what kind of ways do we see the issue starting with doctors not getting the full picture of just limited labs, and kind of go into how you see things differently?
So I talk a lot about hidden blind spots that are holding you back, holding high performers back from really achieving the success they're looking for. And it starts with testosterone. You know, I'm focused. My passion is men's health. Obviously, at the Gapin Institute, we work with women as well. I have a team with me, but my focus is men's health. And the first thing that always comes up is testosterone. And so you mentioned lab values. I think it's important to recognize that our lab value system, if you will, for testosterone is broken, because we look at that range on the right side of the page, and if you fall in that range, you're called, quote, normal.
Yeah.
This drives me crazy, because that range is not the normal, optimal, ideal range. That's the reference range. Look at the top on the right side of the lab slip on the right, on the top, you'll see reference range. What does that mean? That's the average. The reference range, statistically, what the labs do, they look at all the labs, 1 million, 2 million testosterone levels that were drawn, and what's the average? Well, they take the median, and then they take 2 standard deviations on either side of that median, and that's your reference range. So it's nothing more than the average. We know, however, from massive studies here in the US, the Male Massachusetts Aging Study, and 2 other studies in Europe, Sweden and Finland, 20 plus year longitudinal studies, that have all shown the same thing. And that is that testosterone levels are about half what they were 20, 30 years ago. Half. And
That's
so
crazy.
Going back to that reference range has shifted lower and lower and lower every year. And we're led into this false sense of complacency that, yeah, we're fine. My testosterone level is, quote, normal. And so I'll see guys come in with a testosterone level of 380, and their doctor told them they're, quote, normal. And excuse my language, Debbie, but that's bullshit. It's just not. It's not what guys need. And so that's the first thing, is fixing testosterone. But testosterone is one part of a symphony, if you will, of hormones. And so it's so critical that we look at cortisol as well, look at estrogen, look at melatonin, look at vitamin D, look at insulin, look at growth hormone, look at all these other hormones that interplay with each other and have such a dramatic effect. And so those are blind spots holding you back. You mentioned functional testing. One of the big things that we focus on here in the Gapin Institute are hidden blind spots that are causing issues with your health, specifically your microbiome. So one of the big things we do here is a GI map test, GI effects test, looking at microbiome, looking for signs of dysbiosis, which means simply, are the bad bugs outnumbering the good bugs in your colon, in your gut. And it's important to recognize that the microbiome controls your whole body. The bugs in your gut, they control hormone production, neurotransmitter production, energy, metabolism. They affect genetic expression more than we realize. And so it's so important to look at these things that are holding us back. And so those are just 2 examples of all the tests that we do here, Debbie, to take a much deeper dive into high performers, how we can optimize and help you be better.
Well, I'm reading Dr. William Davis's new book called, I just brought it with me, called Super Gut. And just even the first little pages I was reading last night, just started it, but just how depression is related to our microbiome, and how many people just get treated with antidepressants, and doesn't solve why do you have depression.
Right.
And look at all the newest research about depression and mood swings and anxiety, how it's like, why don't we look at a GI map or Genova Diagnostics test to figure out what's off balance? And I think it's just so fascinating to see these multiple labs together and put the missing pieces of a puzzle to figure out how to optimize that person for performing their best in life. So you can be the best dad, you can be the best son and husband, wife, whatever. But so why do you pick on testosterone first? So what drives you to that for men's health to be an optimizer? What is it with the testosterone marker that is so important to work on? And also, why would testosterone be off so much in people nowadays?
Great. So 2-part question. Fantastic question. Number one, we know that when it comes to hormones, testosterone is probably one of the most impactful hormones, and it certainly gets the most attention. Guys will come in saying, I think I have low T, or I have low T, or what about my T? It's all about the testosterone in men. And we know that it's critically important when it comes to things like cognitive function. cognitive function is directly tied to testosterone levels. We know that testosterone levels can affect mood and is clearly associated with depression. We know testosterone is critically important when it comes to bone health and it comes to energy and metabolism and burning visceral fat. In fact, over a dozen studies show very clearly that men with low testosterone have about a 30% increased risk of cardiovascular disease and a major adverse cardiac event. And so we think of testosterone as just the muscle hormone or the sex hormone, but it's so much more important. And it has to do with metabolic health, and it has to do with vascular health, and ultimately longevity. Studies show that men with higher testosterone levels clearly live longer. And so it's a critically important hormone. The second part of your question was, why is it lower? And unequivocally, my answer is endocrine disruption. So we have studies that demonstrate very clearly that the toxins, chemicals in our environment are crushing testosterone levels. And so we can identify things such as plastics, plastic water bottles, plastic food containers, plastic all around us, IV tubing made of plastics, plastics in our car, plastics in our personal care products. The chemicals in our personal care products, in our laundry detergent, especially our shampoo, our sunscreen, our any scented products full of chemicals that are crushing hormones. The clothing we wear, whether it's the laundry detergent or it's the synthetics that are made of various forms of plastics. We can look at our foods, non-organic fruits and vegetables. Those crops are sprayed with chemicals like atrazine, which is an herbicide, second most commonly used herbicide behind glyphosate. Studies clearly show these chemicals crush testosterone.
Wow. And so instead of like the solution for this, do you not just give people testosterone supplementation, but we have to figure out, why is your testosterone low? It's contributing to driving that low, and look at the whole picture. So we're not just here, let's test testosterone, give you testosterone, think you're going to be all better.
Exactly.
We have to look at solutions.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah. The knee-jerk reaction among the medical community is if your testosterone level goes 1 point below that magical, ridiculous cutoff, now I'm going to give you testosterone therapy. When in fact, you got to focus on the toxins, on limiting exposure to these toxins, on, these are daily habits. Like, are you eating organic fruits, fruits and vegetables? Are you filtering your water? We know our water supplies are poisoned with synthetic estradiol from women's birth control that doesn't get filtered. We know that personal care products are loaded with chemicals. So are you avoiding those chemicals? Are we doing what we can to upregulate or turn on our body's ability to detoxify and clear these toxins? These are all critical aspects of improving testosterone. And we haven't even talked about any other aspects of health, like nutrition, sleep, stress, all the other good stuff. But this is critically important.
Yeah. So, thinking of the liver is, we need to address the liver health. Are we able to detoxify phase 1 and 2, and phase 3, we want to work on first the drainage pathways, but talk about, what you do to address the liver health if we have all these toxins coming in from our environment, and then internally endotoxicity with our microbiome dysfunction. But how does that impact our liver? So a lot of people don't even look at that too.
Absolutely. And a lot of this, we start to get into precision medicine, where we use genetics for a lot of this as well, to look at how your body, processes toxins. Phase 2 detox especially is important when we look at endotoxins and, pollution and all the chemicals that we're talking about. So, looking at our food, make sure we're eating clean, nutrition is going to be critically impactful as well. Genetics help us understand things like, glutathione, superoxide dismutase, some of these other key pathways involved in phase 2 detox that no one pays attention to, but sometimes it needs help. And so, how do we improve glutathione production? Things like NAC and green tea, EGCG, and even things like sauna and cryo have its role in helping improve mitochondrial function as well as detox. Looking at all these ways that we can improve our body's ability to detoxify is important. A lot of it's eliminating exposures as well.
Now talk about chronic stress, how this impacts all that, because a lot of our audience is, as your high performers, and as I say, the type A, AAA personality that always thinks more is better. And especially those people that are fitting in endurance sports or triathlon, that you're doing swim, bike, run, plus weightlifting, plus, whatever else on top of a full-time job, top of family duty. And then we end up really overfilling that beaker of stress. So how do you deal with stress and the hormones, and how that can optimize our health for performance in
Yeah.
life?
Yeah. So I like to think of stress as coming from a lot of different sources. So let me go downstream first, and then I'll go upstream here. So when we think about stress, what does it do? It causes chronic elevation of our stress hormone called cortisol. Cortisol is good when you're running from a tiger, but it's not so good to be elevated on a long-term basis. It's not good for your body. Your body needs to have balance to it, balance of our nervous system. When we have chronically elevated cortisol, it tells your brain to turn off production of other key hormones, especially testosterone, especially thyroid. It causes issues with inflammation. It causes issues with blood sugar regulation. And so it affects insulin sensitivity over the long term as well. Promotes storage of visceral fat. It crushes sleep, which will then cause more stress as well. And so we know that chronic stress, and by chronic, we mean not just the acute stressor. We're talking about long-term stress that goes unmitigated, that can cause significant consequences. And downstream, it leads to cardiovascular disease and obesity and, shortened longevity as well. And so we know the long-term consequences of stress. What causes this stress? Well, you mentioned psychological for sure. It's, how do we balance, how do we become more resilient to all the stuff that happens in our daily life? How do we become more emboldened, more empowered to overcome those challenges? Because they're never going to stop. It's how do you react to them? How do you respond to them, rather than react to them is really the key. And so the psychological is a big part of it. So I'm a huge proponent of breathing exercises. Breathing, when I first mentioned this, guys were like, I know how to breathe. Leave me alone. I've been breathing my whole life. But most people breathe through their mouth, and they breathe too much and too often. And that actually has severe physiologic consequences. And so learning how to breathe properly is really important technique when it comes to controlling stress. Meditation, and a lot of people get turned off by that phrase. This could simply be what I used to do on my way home from work. I would, when I was still in urology, I'd leave the hospital and I'd park in this parking lot in my car, and I'd turn on Headspace app on my phone, and I would just play a guided meditation for 10 minutes. Even that, something as simple as that, it helps you reframe your mind and focus on what's important and overcome all those stressors. So breathing exercises is so important. Meditation, mindfulness practices are really key when it comes to stress. Focusing on sleep hygiene, focusing on getting good quality sleep is going to be helpful as well. So those are all the psychological aspects of stress. And then I'll look at the nutritional sources of stress, all the processed foods and the sugars and the seed oils that are stressing our body in a different way. Microbiome issues are stressing our body in a different way. Looking at things like poor sleep, that's stressing our body in a harmful way. And even overtraining. A lot of guys are actually addicted to exercise and training, and they overtrain to the point that that's actually chronic stress that's causing more harm than good as well.
Yeah, I think that's common.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I would say it's the Goldilocks effect of everything, not too much, not too little, just that right dose to create that effective positive response. And I think a lot of high performers tend to just do everything to the extreme, even cold therapy. If it's beneficial, let's do it every day. And 2 minutes. No, let me do 15 minutes, just pushing everything to the edge that is always like beyond what's going to benefit you in the long run, I think. So it's really finding the individualized approach to coaching people to be their best self is what is the right amount, create that good positive dose for you, a unique self. Because I think I tend probably the genetics to really have to add in more stress management and not overload my day. And I have to leave breaks in between things because, how did I get my adrenal exhaustion when other people can tolerate that level of crazy schedule and training at a high level for endurance sports, and other people just like, oh, I'm fine. They can keep doing that. So I think it's really looking at each person unique genetics and their lifestyle habits.
That's right. Yeah. And we actually have genetics around cortisol and how our brain responds to cortisol. And some of that may come into play there, Debbie, when we look at why do people have such an ability to better handle that stress and respond in a better way to it. Sure.
Yeah, I have a friend that I stopped doing Ironmans 2013, and she's still racing, one or two. 'Cause if you do Ironman in Hawaii, you have to qualify another Ironman. So you end up doing 2 Ironmans a year. And then, she's been doing that for 20 something years. Like, one, how do you not get tired and burned out? And two, how does your body keep up with you? And it doesn't cause excessive stress. So anyways, I want to go back to testosterone because I think this is a huge topic, but also for females too, because I just got my labs back. I went to a naturopath because I wanted to see, do I need some hormone supplements? And I need to see a doctor for that. But it is, important. One is to take the get labs from someone that can help you, but put them in the optimal ranges, not the normal ranges, and then figure out why are my hormones low, and not just take testosterone, but I have to really look at, okay, like we went through how to create a personalized program. Why are your hormones low? What to do about it? So kind of walk us through how you start working with a client to get them to, like, if they come to you usually feeling tired, low libido, let's start from the beginning. What are the common symptoms of people with low hormone optimization?
Sure. Yeah. So most of the clients I work with, I have a sneeze coming, excuse me when it happens. A lot of clients I work with, they are high-performing individuals. They're executives or entrepreneurs. They are retired athletes. They're CEOs of a big company. They're traveling around the world. And they have the same common 4 complaints. It's interesting. I'm incredibly tired, especially late in the day. I can't keep my eyes open. I'm just so tired. I get home from work, see the family. I'm exhausted. I just want to collapse. Number 2, my brain's not working like it used to. Brain fog, loss of clarity, can't focus, can't concentrate, can't lose weight, got the belly fat. No matter what I do, I cannot burn that belly fat. And then 4, issues in the bedroom. Can't perform like I used to. Something's not quite the same. I used to chase my wife around. Now she's chasing me around saying, what's wrong? She thinks I'm cheating on her. I just don't have any interest. Can't perform when I do, that sort of thing. So it's a mix and match of any of those 4 symptoms I hear every day. And so when we look at hormones, it's, in my mind, really important to recognize that when testosterone is not optimal, it's never on an island. Testosterone is part of this symphony I mentioned. And when we look at our human operating system, it's never going to be a problem in isolation. It's typically a result of other problems. It could be the toxins we talked about. It could be nutrition. It could be micronutrient deficiencies over time. It could be sleep. It could be stress. It could be overtraining. It could be microbiome issues. It could be issues with our energy production, organic acids. Whatever it may be, testosterone is the symptom, not the cause. And so when I find issues with testosterone, it is almost invariably also associated with issues with thyroid, issues with growth hormone, issues with cortisol, issues with DHEA, issues with other hormones. And so I look at it as a sign that we need to dig a lot deeper and uncover the other issues that are at play here, and then address the causes, the triggers. And that's what's wrong with men's health today, Debbie. Most docs who are out there, they're popping Viagra pills and testosterone shots. And these guys need so much more than that. I'm using CGM, continuous glucose monitor, look at guys' glucose levels, because we know metabolic health directly affects all these hormones. There's things like that that's so important. It's identifying the cause. And that's just not being done elsewhere.
Yeah, I think that's an important thing, is looking at those metrics. So looking at like a heart rate variability we've spoken about before, but looking maybe an Aura Whoop, you're using a CGM. What other data are you collecting? Because you're creating personalized programs with data-driven clues you're collecting from labs, functional labs, and from devices. So talk a little bit about what other data pieces of the puzzle you're collecting.
So when we work with clients, we use a lot of data to drive decisions. And so I love that you mentioned the technology that we use. So we use heart rate variability monitors to look to track a metric that you just mentioned called HRV, or heart rate variability, which is a surrogate for stress, surrogate for our body's physiologic balance of our nervous system, so to speak. And so I have my clients use an HRV monitor on a daily basis to track HRV. We use Aura rings to track sleep because we know from several studies that it has been validated to be one of the most accurate devices that does correspond with sleep study data. So we know that it's going to give you accurate sleep information. And we know sleep is such an important part of the puzzle that we really emphasize that. We recommend devices to track activity. And so I'm a big proponent of the Garmin. I wear a Phoenix myself. There are, there's Fitbit, there's Whoop, there are other devices out there as well.
I got my Aura and my Garmin.
Perfect. Love it. There you go. So yeah, those are my favorite ones for tracking activity. As I mentioned, continuous glucose monitoring is really invaluable. That's not one that we use long-term. Typically, clients will use it for 4 weeks. So each device will last for 2 weeks at a time. So we'll go through about 4 weeks of tracking that, correlate it with dietary intake, and see what foods are great for you, what foods are not so great for you, and use that data to help guide decisions. When it comes to lab work, we do a lot of detailed functional blood testing, looking at hormones, metabolic markers, inflammatory markers, cardiovascular health, micronutrients, detoxification markers. We look at microbiome, I mentioned. We look at other hormones. We use a Dutch test to look at hormone metabolism, looking at cortisol, looking at neurotransmitter markers. Organic acid testing is great to look at metabolism, energy production. Krebs cycle stuff that we learned back in medical school actually does matter. And so we look at all that stuff. And it's putting all these tests together and understanding, we're all individuals, and to try to say that everybody needs the same thing, I think is selling people short. And that's where our medical system has failed us over all this time. And so, we're trying to transform the way we look at health here.
Yeah, I think it's important to know that, we can't just get results or pick up enough clues that make sense with one lab test, and why you need to do 3 to 5 functional lab tests to really see the whole picture, because you pick up clues from the blood chemistry test. It indicates, oh, there might be something going on in the microbiome, and the microbiome test is going to tell you something else that might cause, okay, what's inflammation markers, and then the organic acids and the food sensitivities. I think, it's so fun to me doing that as a health coach, put all this together and like, okay, see all these patterns, but it's hard to explain to people that we can't just do a blood test, get it covered by insurance, that you have to actually invest in your health. Your wealth is your health, and health is your wealth, and see all of this together, because I think that's so important to get the blood and the urine and the stool test together to see what is going on. I think it's great that you guys do that. With the hormones, do you see when you're doing all this investigation, have you seen patterns, like you said, with common symptoms, what people come to you with: fatigue, brain fog, weight loss, libido? But what about other clues with other labs? Are they all different? Or you see any correlations that are common with people that have the low testosterone levels? Do you see anything kind of similar?
Yeah, it's so common to see high performing individuals, and we're talking men here, obviously, but this applies to women too. So I just want to clarify that I'll typically see gut issues, dysbiosis issues will often correlate with testosterone and thyroid issues. It's a very common picture. I see guys who have issues with both. And, looking at thyroid, it's really important to be clear that we want to check the right labs when we're looking at thyroid. So traditional healthcare system, they check TSH, which is thyroid stimulating hormone.
Yeah.
And traditional doctors will say, yeah, your TSH looks fine, you're fine. Even endocrinologists, doctors who have gone through specialty training in hormones, it blows my mind. So for the listener, to clarify here, TSH stands for thyroid stimulating hormone. It's a hormone made by the pituitary gland, and it's actually nothing more than a signaling molecule. It's a signal to the thyroid gland to make thyroid hormone. It is not active in any other way other than to tell the thyroid gland we need thyroid hormone. The thyroid gland will then make T4. The 4 stands for 4 iodine molecules on it, so T4. T4 has some effect but then it gets converted to T3, it gets deiodinated. One of the iodine molecules gets pulled off peripherally throughout the body. And that T3 is now finally the active form of thyroid. T3 is what has most of the beneficial effects that we're looking for with thyroid hormone. That will then feed back to the brain, tell the brain, hey, we're good now. You can turn off TSH. We don't need any more thyroid hormone. And it's this feedback cycle. What's very important is that free T3 is the active, bioavailable, active form of thyroid. And that's the lab you want to be checking, not TSH. Your genetics can dictate how TSH may or may not influence T4 production, to what extent, and the conversion of T4 into T3 would not be measured at all by just checking that TSH. And we haven't even touched on reverse T3, which is a whole separate level of all this. Suffice it to say that T3 is the hormone you want to be looking at, specifically free T3, which is the bioavailable active form of it. And most traditional doctors don't even check it.
I know. Drives me nuts. And we've had a couple podcasts, Dr. Amy and L. Russ, about thyroid, and it's so essential. And the other big thing that drives me nuts is the conversion of T4, T3. Where does it happen? In the liver and in the gut. So if we have liver congestion, if we have microbiome dysbiosis and leaky gut inflammation, we're gonna have poor conversion. So we kind of also look at different patterns of what type of low or high thyroid, but it's often the conversion, if there's not enough ingredients. I mean, there's so much to it. And then so many people just get, oh, my TSH is low, and they're given thyroid medication. Like, you're not looking at the whole picture, as we keep talking about, and figure out what is the why, and looking at the missing pieces of the puzzle. So I think it's so essential to get the full lab test, as you're talking about. But again, it validates that you can't just do the lab test, the blood test. You need to see why is the thyroid T3 even low, and look at that way. Why is the testosterone low? So you have to really get that full picture.
Yeah, absolutely. And one more piece of that is, I see so many patients who have been put on Synthroid, which is pharmaceutical, and it is T4. It is 100% T4. What's critically important to recognize about Synthroid is that it will not convert into T3. Synthetic T4 will not convert into bioavailable active T3. And so you have a bunch of synthetic crappy T4 floating around with no T3. And I see so many patients who feel like shit, excuse my language, because they have no T3, and their doctors tell them, no, you're fine. Your T4 looks fine. Yeah, your TSH rather looks good. It's low. That means T4 must be high. You're good.
Yeah.
These are blind spots holding you back.
Yeah. And I think that's why, sharing these stories and getting this information out there is so important to people, to be your best self and to live your best life. Train now for your races or life events now, but your future self. And we can't just rely on traditional medicine to be our best self, because we don't figure out why is that marker low. And even though that goes back to, if I go to my doctor, all my lab results are normal, but I still feel tired, can't lose weight, can't have any sex life because my libido's low, and I can't sleep at night, and whatever the list goes on with people. But it just like, why do you think that's your new normal? That's part of aging process. Drives me nuts. Like, that you don't get older and have to experience all this. It is a choice, and you can be active and, do these things to be preventative, or how to be a health optimizer and change these ways. But you have to be motivated. So as we go back and say, okay, yes, my testosterone is low, I could improve that by taking testosterone, but what else do you have people do? You said, all the nutrition and lifestyle habits that go in with that testosterone. So you can't just take a testosterone cream every day and get results, right? Or do you have people that just think, I'm just going to do the testosterone and not worry about the other stuff?
Yeah, great point. A lot of guys will come in thinking that, and that's where I have to make the analogy that you are this amazing human operating system, and you have all these inputs into your system. Testosterone is one of those inputs. And so, sure, we need to correct that. Absolutely. And the other 800 inputs into your system, so to speak. And so that's where we need to really spend our attention and energy. And guys know this, because guys will often come here and they're already on testosterone, and it hasn't worked, and they're like, I don't know, like something else is wrong here. And so they get it when I put it in those terms, in that picture, that it's just one part of a much bigger picture. It's important. It's probably, you know, one of the most important hormones, but you need to look at everything else as well.
So you want them to, you know, you see common with those people low testosterone, they're showing low thyroid function, growth hormone, DHA, and cortisol are showing dysfunction or imbalance there too. So you have to work on all that. I mean, we're not going to, I would say, can't out supplement poor lifestyle habits and can't out exercise poor nutrition habits. So how do you really optimize that person to get those hormones all working together as a symphony? So all the players are working together at optimal level to create the best sound effects, the best show for that person's life.
Yeah, it's putting all those pieces together. You're bringing up the perfect point here, and that is that you have to look at every system individually while understanding how they all connect. So, for example, I'll see guys complaining of issues with sexual performance, and when we think about an erection, it's blood flow. It's increased blood flow. Well, what causes increased blood flow? Well, it's actually nitric oxide, which is technically a hormone. It's a signaling molecule, but nitric oxide is technically a hormone that causes blood vessels to dilate. It allows increased blood flow. And so nitric oxide is critically important when it comes to blood flow. Well, what affects that? Insulin resistance. So wait, doctor, you're telling me that what I'm eating is affecting my erections? What? And that's the key, is that everything is connected together. And so when we look at nutrition and how insulin resistance directly affects perfusion, it all makes perfect sense. And so, you know, looking at the quality of the food that you're eating, looking at the quality of your sleep, looking at your movement, your activity, looking at your lifestyle, you know, it's the boring part, but it's so important. Because just giving you a shot of testosterone and giving you some thyroid medication and some peptides is easy, but that's not going to get you the results that you need.
Okay, so then would you have them do fasting and do keto carnivore and get the body more to, it's like, hey, well, if I'm insulin resistant and that's impacting my testosterone and my libido, are we going to work on being more lower carb, or, you know, adding more proteins and healthy fats, fasting 24 hours a month? What would you do with that? If that's like, okay, insulin resistance, testosterone, sex drive, erections.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, and I know I'm in the low carb community here, so I'm going to be careful what I say, but
okay, I'm not low carb. I always have to say this 100 grams to 200 grams. We're athletes, so we're not zero
you're
carb.
Not keto. I know you're not. Yeah, you're not keto. Yeah. You know, what I like to emphasize is I don't think there's a perfect diet for anyone. And that when we work with individuals, we use genetics to guide that recommendation. And the genetics will help us understand whether you should be eating, you know, more or less protein, for example. Now, you know, we talk about like, you know, 0.8 grams per body weight, you know, per pound body weight or so for protein intake as an optimal level. But for some people that may be much lower than that. And so genetics actually help us understand that. When it comes to fat intake, some people do much better with saturated fat over others. And so saturated fat is in things like red meat, steaks, hamburgers, pork, chicken, bacon, dairy, eggs, cheese, milk, etc. That's all saturated fat. Butter. Some people do fine with saturated fat, whereas others you want to really limit it because it can predispose you to inflammation and earlier risk of cardiovascular disease and Alzheimer's disease and obesity.
Yeah.
And so genetics help guide that. In general, what I emphasize, Debbie, is that a lot of the problems that are being caused with insulin resistance and chronic inflammation and obesity and oxidative stress and all these you know, bad physiologic processes, it's all the poisons that you're putting in your body. So specifically, we're talking things like seed oils. And I know a lot of people don't hear much about this, but it's things like you go to Target. My wife and I were at Target this last year. I went to get almonds, and big bag of almonds. You need to be looking at the ingredients of everything you eat. Okay. And this is a great example why. Look at the back of this bag of almonds. Ingredients, almonds. Perfect. Good to go. The bag next to it said almonds, dry roasted. Look at the back. Ingredients. The very first ingredient, sunflower oil, almonds, sea salt. So sunflower oil, safflower oil, peanut oil, cottonseed oil, any of these oils, they are omega-6 polyunsaturated fats. They are pro-inflammatory. They promote insulin resistance. They promote increased visceral fat. They promote cardiovascular disease, and they are true poisons. And these poisons are everywhere. Any packaged product, look at the ingredients, and you're probably going to find some sort of seed oil in them. When you go to a restaurant, make no mistake about it, they're cooking your food in this shitty poison that's killing you.
Yeah.
And so for me, a lot of it is genetics to help you understand what's the best macro ratios for you, whether you should be, low carb or intermediate carb or high carb, for example, whatever. The genetics can help us guide that. But number two, a lot of it is what should you not be eating? And it's those pro-inflammatory oils. Obviously, we all know the dangers of sugar and how there's too much sugar everywhere, and, hidden sugar and things like ketchup that you might not ever think of. I like to keep people away from the simple carbs. If you are going to eat carbs doesn't mean pizza, jujubes, cupcakes. It means things like sweet potatoes and broccoli and quinoa, and the healthy, carbs that are the complex carbs is really what we talk about when you're going to be eating carbs. And to me, when it comes to general nutrition guidance for people, it's getting rid of the poisons that are killing you. Focusing on whole, real foods, organic whenever possible is really, in my mind, the key.
Mm-hmm. No, 100% agreed. So with, wrapping up, we're going to run out of time as always. I have plenty of time and it goes so fast. Women, anything on women, as you guys have some coaching for females.
Sure.
Do you find any difference? Like you always hear testosterone in men, but anything to comment on females and testosterone? As I know my level was so low and Dr. Amy's like, you need testosterone, and
Definitely
really getting help on that. But talk a little bit, if you have anything on the female athlete on testosterone.
Yeah, we do a lot of work with women, and I'll tell you, especially when women perimenopausal through menopause, testosterone levels plummet, and the reason for that is simply that estradiol gets converted, or your whole steroid pathway gets crushed, and testosterone gets converted to estradiol. And the estrogen metabolic byproducts. And so we see clearly that women's testosterone levels plummet as they go through menopause, and it's intimately tied to the same things that apply to men: energy, metabolism, cognitive function, sex drive, and even things like cardiovascular health. And so critically important that women get tested for testosterone, and we see amazing improvement in all those symptoms with testosterone therapy in women, without question.
Yeah, and we're not going to grow a beard and start looking like a man if we take testosterone, because it's just a little dose. And, people, I think high testosterone is not right for females or something. I think it just seems we have information out there.
You're right. There's this misconception that because it's like an anabolic steroid that it must be bad for women, and it's going to cause a bunch of hair and muscle and rage, and that's all nonsense. Honestly, it's going to help with metabolism. It's going to help with energy. Some women do get some acne with it, more like on their back and chest, which can be treated. There's a way we can help you overcome that. But the benefits of testosterone therapy in women far, far, far outweigh any potential negatives.
Yeah. And then what are the levels, or what lab tests, if people are getting labs from their doctor and they're like, oh, what is my testosterone? Is it in the serum? What marker are you looking at? What is your range for men and what is for women?
Yeah. So for men, we don't care about those reference ranges. As I mentioned earlier, I almost don't even care. And every lab has a slightly different reference range. And I'm not looking at the total testosterone in men so much as the free. So to clarify here, testosterone floating in the bloodstream will get bound to proteins such as SHBG, for example, sex hormone binding globulin. And when testosterone binds to SHBG, for example, it can no longer get into the cell because it's too big now. It's attached to this big protein, and it can't do its job. It's basically rendered inactive. And so the free testosterone is the count of testosterone molecules that are not bound to proteins, free floating, able to get into the cell and have its biologic effect. And so free testosterone is what we're looking for. And for men, I aim for somewhere in the range of 200 to 250. It depends on the scale. Several labs will use different scales there, but typically 200 to 250 is my goal for that. But every guy's gonna be a little different too, Debbie. And I'll when I work with guys, I'll find what that sweet spot is for them. Some guys need it on the higher side than others. So it's a little individualized. For women, it's a little different. They don't need testosterone levels nearly that high. We're looking at totals in the range, around 200, 150, 200, which is very high. If you look at those reference ranges, again, we're looking at what's optimal, not what those normals are or averages are.
Yeah. I think mine was like at 4.
Yeah.
Is that
You see that all the time.
You got to get them tested, and you got to look at you got to do a full thyroid panel and look at your reverse T3, look at your cortisol panel with like a Dutch test and your microbiome. And I think a lot of people aren't getting the sex binding globulin hormone done either to see that correlation as well, because that's all we just need to get all this data together, which is why you created the Gapin Institute, I think, to really help people. You can't just do one thing, you have to do the holistic approach, as I say. So you have the high performance health webinar you guys do, and you have a high performance health conference live event in April. But talk a little bit about where people can find you and learn more.
Yeah, thanks so much. So we have a monthly webinar running. The next one will be, I think it's the Wednesday after Thanksgiving. My website is drtracygapin.com or gapininstitute.com. I do have a gift for your listeners. If anyone wants to text the word health, so go to your phone, pull out your phone and type in 26786 and text the word health. Again, that's 26786. And you're going to get a free copy of my Secrets to High Performance Health. You'll get a digital copy of my book, Mel 2.0, and there'll be a link there to register for the monthly webinar. And if you want to jump on a call with my team, you'll be able to do that as well.
Great. Thank you so much. And it's great that you're doing a live event in Florida. It's always a good place to go to when there's not a hurricane.
That's right.
Sarasota, Florida is where the conference is, and that's April. And then you have that 2 times a year.
So we ran our first one last year and it was a great success, and we're going to start doing it twice a year starting in 2023.
Wow, that's a lot of work.
It is.
Well, live events are so great. I think hopefully everyone realized how important live events are with our past few years of not having them, that you really need that personal connection with your people, your tribe, your community. So it's great to have more events like that. So I appreciate that. So
that's right.
Anything do you want to share with us on how you choose to optimize your health and longevity? What are your main things you're working on?
One of the things I focus on, we're just talking about this with my team before we jumped on this podcast interview, is living with intention. And what I mean by that is there are all these things to do when it comes to nutrition and stress and sleep hygiene and cleaning out my gut and take these supplements and these peptides and do these labs. But a lot of people get lost and it's overwhelming and they give up because I don't know what I'm doing here. I can't handle it, too much. Come back to what's that one thing. I love that you asked me this in the beginning. What's my why? What is your why? What drives you? Why are you here? Where do you want to be in 5, 10, 20 years from now?
Yeah.
And I talk about living with intention because everything that you do, every micro decision you make on a daily basis should be in alignment with that why. Mm-hmm. And that starts with making a schedule of your day. Construct your life. For example, for me, my life is so busy as I'm building the Gapin Institute here and training my team and growing and everything I'm doing that I have carved out time in my day where I'm going to train. This is my workout time. Leave me alone. My schedule is blocked. You can't put patients there. You can't put podcast meetings, anything like that. I'm out.
Yeah.
And that's my big rock. And then all the little rocks can fall in around it and all the gravel and sand can fall in around that. But it starts with living with intention and setting your priorities and goals. And then everything else has to follow suit around that, or else you'll never achieve the success you're looking for.
I love that. Yeah. One of my 8 elements of what I call the holistic method coaching program is happiness. And it's more, making sure you have time to have gratitude and, write down things you're grateful for that day or set intentions for the day ahead. I think that's so important to take a moment to reflect on how today was, but also in the morning to say, what do I want to have today? Like yesterday was Monday and I call it Manifest Monday. Like, what do I want to manifest and have happen? Let's
Awesome.
like figure that out. And that's why for me,
Yeah.
exercising in the outdoors or going for a beach walk or just being out in nature is my time to, there's no cell phone on, there's no music. It's just me in my head and really figure out where do I want to be in life. And that's, I think, important for people to do, because I think we get so busy and so distracted and we're not ever connected with our own selves. And I find that when I coach people, it's like, what are your symptoms? Oh, I don't really know if that happens or not. And so I think it's important to be connected with yourself in that way. And so living with intention, I think, is a great way to, live our life, to be,
That's right.
live our best self and just make every day your best day, because you
That's
never
right.
know when it's the last.
Right. Exactly.
So awesome. Well, I'll put all the links in the show notes and everyone can learn more. And if you want to optimize your health as a male, it's not just taking testosterone, but how you're going to help them at the Gapin Institute to work on your whole lifestyle, nutrition, and just get that personalized program. So great job and keep it up.
Thanks so much, Debbie.